For joining us today for my father's memorial. My father passed away in Ithaca on October 28th after about a week in Prayuga Medical. He was 85 years old. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by many of his loved ones. He had visited us for many summers since I came to Ithaca, but recently he actually spent most of his time in India with my sister Reggie and her family, Jaishankar, Tejas and Kanchana. They are joining us on live stream from India, so that's why there's a laptop here, so just be warned. Between Reggie and Jaishankar and my mother here and my father's dear friend, my uncle Joe, my father was pampered in the last few years of his life. He had a wonderful time. When he visited this year, he knew it was his last summer, and he was the happiest I'd ever seen him in his entire life. We are fortunate to have our closest friends here with us. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. Nice to see so many faces here today. As Kavita said, she's actually the youngest of the lot. 3 siblings. My sister Reggie is also younger than me, is online from India. I love my father very dearly. And unlike Kavita, I came prepared with tissues here, just in case I need it. I'm going to try to convey in a few, in a short while, give you a glimpse of him, a glimpse of who the man was behind the curtain here. He was born in a little village in Tamil Nadu. It's a small village in India with no running water, no electricity. And he graduated with a basic high school degree, and barely graduated, as he tells me. He made it out of there. But with that minimal amount of formal education, he became a squadron leader in the Indian Air Force, defended his country proudly in 2 wars, landed and took off from the highest landing ground of the Himalayan mountains, for which he got an award. As if that wasn't enough, he went on to do 30 years in commercial aviation as an airline pilot, retired as a jumbo commander, flew the 747s very proudly. Again, topped that off by becoming the president and fellow of the Aeronautical Society of India, and all this with a high school degree. And he accomplished all this because of 2 things. He was a man of action. In fact, he told all of us children and his grandchildren very much so that the key to life is to be always on the path of ceaseless action. Always got to be active in life. That was his motto to us. After he retired, he decided that he hadn't contributed enough to all of us, the family and humanity. So he started writing books. Some very personal books, one of them that are displayed here today. He wrote 4 personal books for his children, and 7 of them are about Hindu philosophy. He read more than all of us put together. We had all the degrees between me and my sisters. We'd accumulated all of those degrees. They were to accumulate, but he outread us. Easy. He read everything from Somerset Maugham to Purapati Munshi to Dostoevsky, and regaled us with his thoughts, his summary of those books here. But above all, as he told us, all this was because he was a man of action, and that's what he believed in. He summarized the Bhagavad Gita, which is the holy book of the Hindus, as such. He told his children and his grandchildren, let no philosophy fool you into inaction. I think that's just a beautiful 1-line summary of the Bhagavad Gita and what it means. And that was my father. He read, but he was able to very succinctly share with us what the deepest meaning was in everything that he read. I'll share with you a few memories, very personal memories of me and my father, the memories that I have of him. But as I do that, I want to tell you that he considered the highest form of human intelligence as a sense of humor. So as you listen to my memories, please feel free to chuckle, laugh, definitely smile, because he would absolutely have wanted that. He was a man of humor, mischievous humor, as Kavita calls it, or wicked humor even. That was very much at the heart of everything that he did. So I'll share a couple of memories. For me, one of the vivid memories is Friday evenings in the Bala household. It was party time. My father would call a couple of his friends over. He called them his dirty half dozen. They would come over, and they were pilots like him. And I was invited to be a part of this. Wonderful. So I was invited to do that. He would open his cabinet and bring out his Johnny Walker Black Label whiskey. In those days, it was Benson Hedges cigarettes. He just loved that. That was part of his life. His friends came over. He enjoyed that with him. And I sat down with my tall ginger ale, of course, and listened to his stories. And as pilots talked, the tales got taller, they got bigger, and we heard all kinds of stories about their adventure days. It was beautiful. It's just one of my very beautiful memories of my father. And as the alcohol flowed, of course, the conversation became more philosophical. I don't know why, but that's what happens, I guess, when you drink. So as he imbibed spirits, it became more spiritual, and the evening would always end with a discussion about perception and reality. I think it's a research. Kavita's chuckling because that's research that she's doing right now on image and image recognition, but that was it, Perception and Reality, a book by Raja Rao, A Serpent in the Road, that he always talked about. And that happened at 11:30 at night. I was really sleepy, but I listened to him and enjoyed those stories there. One of these evenings, I do remember, a very serious friend of mine landed up at home. He was young like me at that time, but somehow he's one of these kids who at the age of 5, I think, knew exactly what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. One of those kids. And my father decided to poke some fun, have some fun with him. So he started loosening him up, asked a few questions. The grandchildren know the kind of questions my father would ask. So started poking around. My friend didn't budge. He sat there like this, didn't say, not even a smile. And my father tried for about, I think, 10 minutes, and then kind of gave up. And he said something to my friend and me that made my friend laugh out loud. That's the first time I saw him laugh that loudly. And I fell off the sofa laughing. And he looked at my friend and he said something like this. He said, "Listen, young man, you need to loosen up. You look like you've come to my funeral." That was my father. So please, do laugh. Please do not treat it like it's his funeral. But that was my father. That was his kind of humor too. It was a very mischievous sense of humor that he had there. The other memory I have of my father is storytelling. And this is perhaps the most important part of his whole life. In Hindu tradition, a lot of the tradition is conveyed through word of mouth. You know, the written word came much later. He told us stories, but the way he told us the stories, he engaged me. When I was young, at least, I remember listening to his stories. He forced us to listen to the opposite view. He forced us to challenge the viewpoint that he was offering. Forced us to challenge the regular narrative and everything that he did. And that's what made the stories interesting. Because it just wasn't a narrative about characters and people. It was actually all about understanding the story behind the story. So we'd ask about characters, subplots, what's the big plot? And that was how he just caught our attention. And I remember staying up to very late at night just to enjoy that with him. But one of the things I realized is, as I told the stories to my children, my nephews and my niece, that I told the stories in the very same way. And what was a pleasure for me to see was that they responded the same way. My children asked me deep questions. Tell me the details. Oh, that can't be the story. Why did he do that? Or is good really that good? Is evil really that evil? And they would ask me those kinds of questions. In fact, my children, you can ask them after this who Drishtadyumna from the Mahabharata was. They actually know that, so they will tell you that. Or my nephews, ask them who Tenali Rama was, and they'll tell you that. You need a lot of time there. You need to spend the whole afternoon with them once they start talking. But it's those stories. It's those things that kept us going. One of the things I remember is, there was the story of Ramayana, one of the books of the Hindus, part of the mythology and the Hindu pantheon really, is a story of the good god King Rama defeating the evil demon King Ravan and returning back to his kingdom, and people celebrating with the Festival of Lights. It's a very simple story. It's actually a straightforward narrative. But somehow my father managed to create a very interesting story out of it. He got me hooked on Ravan, the evil demon king. He talked to me about him and his perspectives, and I started to think about the whole story and what it meant. And then, one of these conversations, he told me that the King Ravan was actually Tamil, ethnic Tamil, like me and my father. So I asked him, oh, wait a minute, that means, we're related, right? And my father, without batting an eyelid, said, absolutely yes. Facts are not so important in the Bala household as you will come to know. But, he said, absolutely yes. So I went to school the next day, and I came back and told him I shared something with my father, that he looked at me and he said, oh my God, this is fantastic. You really understood the meaning of all the stories I told him, he told me. And what I shared with my father was that I went to my school and I told all my friends that my great-great-great-grandfather is the evil demon king Ram. So there goes it. That's the narrative in the story with our family. Facts don't matter, it's a story. But again, he made those stories come to life and interesting for us. It's a memory I have of my childhood, very vivid memory. I'll close on a note about family. And this was perhaps a theme throughout my father's life, and I think the most important thing in his life. When he was 18 years old, he was thrust into becoming the head of household. His father passed away, and he took financial and social leadership, if you will, of his family, his 5 siblings and his mother at that time. He was the only one with, who had to get a job and take care of his family. It molded him a lot. And as I shared with you, he joined the Air Force and became a pilot officer somehow. Started as a mechanic and became a pilot officer. And my mother reminded me that one of the proudest moments for my father was, his father was an ordinary airman in the Air Force. And he had to salute my father because my father was an officer. How beautiful is that? That was something very beautiful to my grandfather and my father himself. So, but as I share this, family, I think, became important to him at that young age. At the age of 18, he realized the value of family. And he built an incredible family. with my mother, Swarna, here for 56 years, absolutely beautiful. His close friend, Joe, that we don't call Joe, we call him Joe Mama, which means uncle in Tamil. Joe Mama added sweetness to our family. Joe Mama, my mother put together with my father, created this amazing family experience that we all try to live out with our family. And our children will be the judge of whether we've succeeded in creating a happy household. We hope we have. But I remember one thing, I was 20 years old, I'll end with this, and I was coming to this country to make my own adventures, my own future, like my father did at the age of 18. I was coming to America, it was an amazing experience, but I didn't know what to expect. It was something new for me. He sat me down and he made me read a paragraph from one of his favorite philosophers, Will Durant. It was a chapter in a book. The chapter was actually about a tough subject, death. That was the title of the chapter. And he told me to just read the last paragraph. And I believe in that paragraph is what sums up his belief and what he thought of life. In that, Will Durant is invited by his son, and he's sitting at a garden party. He's looking beyond the garden. And Will Durant says, "As I see my children and my children's children laughing, I realize that I have cheated death." And that was pretty much my father's belief. So as we carry on his memory, his legacy, through his stories, we will keep him alive in our hearts, through the children and the grandchildren. May he rest in peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
So he didn't even write a speech. I knew I needed to write it out. I wrote it out for the, I normally don't, but I did this time. My father was a man of contradictions. He was irreverent, he was a rebel who questioned norms and conventions, but he was also a traditional Hindu Brahmin. He was always the life of the party. If he walked into a room, everybody started laughing, but he was also serious and philosophical, as Krishna said. He was a man of action, but he was also able to reflect deeply. So Krishna has described sort of his view. I thought I would share with you sort of how I learned to actually appreciate my father more as I got older, and how I saw more of him in all of us, and I just wanted to share that with some of you. So when I do something crazy, blame my dad. Almost surely it comes from him, not from her. So when he first got to the Air Force, as Krishna said, he had only learned broken English in a Tamil school really, and English was a second language. And he was completely daunted by the fellow officers. A lot of them came from private schools with British. He told me, this is, so I'm telling the stories that I remember, some of them Krishna and I shared too. At every Air Force station he went, he would volunteer to run the library so that he could both order the books and read all the books. And that was when he really fed his thirst for reading, and it was a thirst that was insatiable. He read, as Krishna said, was Dostoevsky, Somerset Maugham were his favorites, Dickens, he loved Dickens, but also a sense of humor meant he loved Catch-22, loved The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Those are the kinds of things he really enjoyed. In his early life, he read both fiction and non-fiction, but actually from the mid to the later years, it was primarily non-fiction with history. He knew a lot of history, and sometimes he would also embellish a little bit as he went along. That was his nature. Religion and philosophy, he spent a lot of time reading about that. I inherited, I think I'm the only person in the family who truly inherited his love of reading among the siblings, my brother and sister and I. But it turns out all three of my children are completely inseparable from books, though in all fairness they get it from both sides, me and Andrew too. But I think of that as being at least one of my father's legacies. He was a natural and gifted writer in Tamil. He actually wrote beautiful poetry in Tamil and plays before he taught himself English, and then he wrote in English too. But actually I think his Tamil, and it was tragic, none of the children know Tamil well enough to appreciate his poetry. My mother does, and her family has always appreciated his erudition in Tamil. His speeches were fiery and inspiring. That was actually his nature. And in fact, I'm going to tell some stories about sort of my life. When I was younger, we lived in Bombay, and our house was in a building called Marble Arch. And we jokingly had two camps. My father's camp, which was my father and brother on one side of the house, and the other camp, and that was my mother and uncle raising the two daughters on this side. And there was a big living room in the middle. They did their thing on that side, and we did ours. And we had very different views, these two camps. From our point of view, they were crazy and undisciplined. I think they thought we were boring and responsible, but we got the job done, we kept the house going, and that was just fine with them. And my father would call himself the madman of Marble Arch. He would make crazy proclamations. I remember once there was a lot of chaos going on. I think there was some electric circuit burning. And my brother and my father were sitting there discussing having a bridge going from Bandra over to the other side of town, and how they would charge if they did such a bridge, which they never did. Although now there is such a bridge, by the way, 40-year thing. But if they did a bridge, this is how much they would charge for it. And we are all sitting here saying, can't you see that the door is bell is ringing? Somebody should go. No, they just tuned us all out, and they had a great time on that side of the house. And so Krishna actually has had the deepest influence of my dad on him. His relationship with Krishna was, I think, the most meaningful relationship in my father's life. Unfortunately, he mostly left the girls alone to get raised separately on the other side, which was probably good for us given how crazy he was. But when I came to 8th grade, there was a competition on science in Bombay at the Nehru Planetarium and the Science Center. I don't know, for those of you from Bombay, you might know the planetarium. He suddenly took an interest in me. He was a natural orator, so he took me under his wing. We picked a topic. It was going to be about the environmental challenges facing our time. He helped me put together the research, make a poster, and prepare a speech. And shockingly for all of us, I took first place in Bombay, which we never expected. I was just a kid in some random public school. Nobody expected that I could take first place in Bombay. And so it was surprising to everybody, but my father was very, very proud. And after that competition, whenever I gave talks or gave a lecture, he would always ask me, how's your lectures going? How's your teaching going? And if I said it's going great, he would say, yes, I gave you good training in Bombay when he started when you were in 8th grade. And they're laughing because he always took credit for all those accomplishments, any accomplishment after that based on that one thing. In fact, my family was joking that today he would say, if he were here, that this was to his credit, which is true. The only reason we are having the event today, he gets full credit for that. So I have to say, wherever you are, Daddy, thank you. This memorial would be boring if you weren't such a fascinating character. You get full credit for that. And that was his nature. But he actually, jokes aside, for the first time after that competition, he actually started changing his mind about the place of women and girls in the world, because he had a very traditional upbringing where there was a place for women and there was a place for men. And he could see with his daughters, both me and with Reggie and the life that she chose for herself, he could see that the world was changing and that it didn't make much sense. He was a thinking man, he was a deep thinker. So he struggled between the ideas he was brought up with and what as a thinking man he could appreciate was the reality of the talent that his children had. And so slowly, step by step, Krishna and I talked about it, he changed his attitude over time, and that was a good thing. He was, wonderful. And in fact, in 1994, which is still a long time ago, he continued to change, but he dedicated his 1994 book, which is here, about his travels. It's about his travels within India. And in the foreword, he said, dedicated to Kavita, the Anasuya. So, Anasuya was the wife of Maharishi Atri, and she was in Hindu lore actually quite famed in her own right. So he said, dedicated to Kavita, the Anasuya, whose perceptive reflections I delightfully admire, but do not necessarily agree with. Just classic of my dad. In fact, we argued a lot in our family. That is just who we were. We would always have loud arguments, and in a good way. And he was very proud if we bested him in an argument. After heated discussions with the kids, not only me, but even with Krishna and with Reggie about philosophy, about life, about our choices, he would tell everybody with great pride, my children say I'm an idiot. We never said that, but he would say, oh, they argue with me and they call me an idiot. And that was not true, but he was proud that we were questioning the limitations that were placed on us. He did not accept limitations that were placed on him, and he wanted us to push the boundaries. And that I give him credit for. That was who he was. He pushed all the time. He was a bold leader and a visionary, actually. And in fact, in India, this kind of break the rules kind of person is typically not appreciated. And indeed, he made enemies. Along his life, Krishna and I would joke, if he walked into a room with 5 people, 3 people would love him and 2 would hate him. He could not leave a room unpolarized. They would be polarized, and that is just how it was with Bala. And so and he lived his life with all the implications of making friends and enemies, deep friends and great enemies too. He always joked though, because he was such a rule breaker, that if he was born in America, he would have been the Howard Hughes of America. Which sounds crazy, but actually I think it was true. And the reason you could see that is he had a huge impact on the Aeronautical Society of India. Later I'll read a little excerpt from what they wrote to us. But as Krishna said, even though he had a high school education, he was a fellow of the society. If you go ever to the Smithsonian Museum in DC, the Udvar Hazy Museum, it's actually outside of DC, they have all of the names of people who have contributed to aeronautical endeavors in the world, and my father's name is there for a guy with a high school education. It was stunning, and he has made a deep contribution, so they are always grateful to what he did for them. And in fact, as I was telling Charlie this, in the university setting, we now have this concept of first-generation students, right? Technically, my brother and I are first-generation students because both of our parents had a high school education. But actually, he was really the zero-generation person because he's the one who took himself from that village and made his life from nothing. Life didn't give him much, and he just went with it. So that, that I think defined who he was. Krishna already talked about. He was a very complex person as a consequence. I really do think he was a man of deep contradictions, and that showed up in everything that he lived in, every way in which he lived his life. If you asked him, he would say his life was great and that he was lucky, but actually, as Krishna said, life was not kind to him. He had to look after 2 younger brothers and 3 younger sisters. And actually, the 2 younger brothers died in their 30s and 40s. And so he had to bury them, not bury them in India, we cremate them. But that shook him up, of course, for good reason, and he lasted till 85. They were much younger to him. And the fact that his siblings passed before him made this guy, who had an incredible sense of humor, also a very philosophical person. He had to balance the joy that he wanted to find in life and the life that he was given, and figure out a way to make them both work together. We've all talked about his sense of humor. I'll talk some more about it. It was lively, it was quick, it was cutting. If you had to have a thick skin around him, nobody escaped his humor. If you were wobbly on yourself, tough luck. You'd have to toughen up and learn how to laugh. And in all fairness, he dished it out and he took it back. If you made fun of him with a quick joke that he didn't see coming, he would tell everybody about it. No matter how bad it made him look, he would love that you bested him in that joke would be of joy to him. And that lack of hypocrisy, I give him credit for. We would sometimes get really angry with him because he'd say crazy stuff, and so we'd call him crazy. And he converted that into a name he always used for himself. He said, I am the madman from Marble Arch. To his dying days, he'd say, the madman from Marble Arch has spoken, when he said something, and we were supposed to then pay attention because he would say something crazy. That would become true 20 years from now, according to him. People have often, since all of you are, maybe the Ithaca friends here, people have often asked what his reaction was to Andrew and my getting married, because it was an unconventional wedding for a conventional man from India. He was an unconventional man. He met Andrew and then he met Bob, and he really, really liked them. And he would always joke they were Minnesota Brahmins, and privately in our house, because of their value of education, they loved education, they were decent people with a good value system. He really appreciated that. In fact, he would joke, they're better Brahmins than we are, so we have to behave well when they come to the house and not show what we really are. That was the classic Bala joke in the back room. And in fact, that is why he came every summer to Ithaca and spent 6 months at a time with us, because he was so comfortable with Andrew and enjoyed being with him. So normally in India, you try to keep your son-in-law happy, because you're very worried that if your son-in-law is not happy, in the conventional world, the daughter-in-law is in a vulnerable position in a house, the son-in-law and the family should be happy, and so you should always make sure the son-in-law, you praise your daughter to your son-in-law so that he appreciates her virtues. So Andrew and I, after a few years of knowing, they're both laughing in the back there, like, what? You can see that, right? That Bob is sitting there and Andrew's back there. When we got married, there's another thing. As a father, you have a responsibility. As I said, he had some conventions played deep on his mind. He had a responsibility to get me married. This is a big thing in India. You have to get your daughter married. So I was the youngest kid. So when I got married to Andrew, at the end of it, he goes to him and says, my responsibilities are done. You have taken her off my hands. She was my last responsibility. Now, and traditionally in India, I can go to the Himalayas to meditate in peace, which is true. And he said, but here's what I'm worried. While I'm there in the Himalayas, I'll look there and there will be this young, handsome man I'll see in the distance, and it will turn out it's Andrew running away from Kavita to get away. He also went to the Himalayas to meditate. And I remember thinking, great Dad, you just get married and this is what your father's telling about you to your husband. Because Andrew just laughed it off. It's been 21 years. Andrew has fortunately not yet run away to the Himalayas. Not yet, at least. My father's waiting there for you, Andrew. So there's a possibility you can meet up with him there. And in fact, he loved the Himalayas. That was where he felt very spiritual. His willpower was astounding. I mean, just the story of his life, you must assume a person who lived that life has an astounding willpower. He would take treks to the Himalayas in his later life, even though it was quite difficult for him. As Krishna said, he lived life fully. He used to call himself, I'm a bachelor with a family. He ate and he drank, he smoked, all things in Hinduism and in Brahman you're not supposed to do as a Brahmin. You're not supposed to eat meat. He ate a lot of meat. He drank and he smoked 2 packs a day. And then, 14 years ago, he actually got sick, and my Jo Mama and my mother told him that he needed to stop, and he stopped. I've met a lot of people who smoke and drink, and nobody can just stop after that, confirmed, like he never spoke about it. 10 years later, he said, it's hard that giving up smoking was hard, but he just stopped, and that willpower was astounding. And that was why he was the man who he was. It was part of who he was. I miss him, as you know, but I actually miss over the years, he tempered himself, he toned down. A lot of you have seen him in the past 20 years. I actually miss the Bala of 30 years ago. He was a firecracker. When your parents are young, you don't actually, that is who they are, but you don't appreciate because they're parents to you. You don't think about their personality, their mom or their dad. But when over time I've reflected on his personality, and he was an untamable force of nature. He was had both his good qualities when you're with nature, the beauty of a force of nature, and its bad qualities, which actually Krishna was the one who saw both sides and loved it. But Krishna loves him deeply, as do we all. But it comes with all of its aspects, and I actually miss that untamable force. That Bala was somebody else, and he had a good life. I'm glad he was here with us at the end.
First one's from Captain Rajaram, one of the pilots that my father worked with during his Air India days. Pilot fraternity of Air India has lost a great friend. He is a great inspiration to all of us. Captain Bala had a great sense of humor, a thunderous voice and laughter. My wife and I have felt he was part of our family and called him as our elder brother, Bala Anna in Tamil. He had a golden heart, was compassionate, and ready to help people in need. He was also a great Tamil scholar, a great orator, and a voracious reader of books on spirituality, and we often discussed Hinduism with him. He made a great contribution while in service to the Indian Pilots Guild, where he was union leader, and the Indian Aeronautical Society of India. He had a very strong willpower and undertook arduous pilgrimage trips to Kailash, Manasarovar in the Himalayan mountains, Kedarnath, Badrinath, and many other places. In the last year of his life, he was privileged to spend a few months in the serene, green, lush surroundings of the Kingdom of Happiness, Bhutan, in the company of the King of Bhutan and the royal family, since his son-in-law, my sister's husband, General Jaishankar, was on military duty posting there. So maybe Kavita can share this.
And in fact, Jaishankar was there for 2 years with my sister Reggie, and because of Jaishankar, he met with the King of Bhutan, and so from His Majesty, the 4th King of Bhutan, he said, "I was greatly saddened to hear that your beloved father had passed away. I fondly remember your father when I met him in the Imtrat house at the and he would love to talk to him and tell him stories too."
This is from Manibannan, from my mother's native place, Gobi Chettipalayam, or Gobi as we call it. It's a small village again in Tamil Nadu. Here's what he says. Captain Bala was a man of principle and a guiding star to many. By becoming the son-in-law of Lakshmanaraya, which is my mother's father, he became the son-in-law to all of Gobi. We miss his style of narration and language on any subject. He will be missed.
From the Aeronautical Society, there's Mr. Ganapati, Dr. Tarun Kant, who's an emeritus professor from IIT Bombay, and Dr. Sudhakar. He actually worked with a bunch of the professors from IIT and during his time in the Aeronautical Society. Captain Bala served as chairman of Aeronautical Society of India, Mumbai for 4 years, from 87 to 89, and again in 93 to 94. He served as a commander of Boeing 707s and 747s and actively participated in all our activities. during his tenure as chairman, at the Aeronautical Society of India reached its zenith. I'm proud to state that it was my effort to bring him in, and as the chairman, he contributed very significantly to the society. And that the society chose to observe silence for him, even though actually it's been a good 20-25.
After being with such a charismatic person for 56 years, it's very difficult for me to accept that he won't be there for us. But that's how life is. My special thanks to Emily and Bob, Andrew's parents, and my special thanks to Mamaji and Papaji, who are Simrat's parents, and Jay's sister, Jayashree and Raju. They had been really wonderful to us. And I thank all of you for being here, and I thank especially Siddharth and Meghna for being so good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I'll just tell you, before we do this last piece, actually if you are playing the last piece, you get on the stage. So after this, we have, oh yes, you too. We have some snacks, and it's not a full meal, but there's a lot of dessert because my father loved sweets. If there were 15 desserts, he would try a little of everything. He would have his plate overflowing. He'd sit there and enjoy it for 40 minutes after a meal. We have plain New York cheesecake because he loved New York cheesecake. When he came into New York, he would get a slice right in plain. I got actually the variety pack too, and Krishna said that's sacrilege. My father would have never tolerated that. We had tapioca pudding from Cozy Shack because he loved that. We didn't make it at home, and it reminded him that in his village, tapioca was actually a staple that was grown there. So it reminded him, we didn't even know that it's not available in Bombay, but it's something they had in his village in the south. There's all kinds of stuff. We have all kinds of bakshanams, which are these South Indian treats which he got from Grand Sweets. Just when he went to Wegmans, he spent half an hour in that bakery section going through picking, and he tried everything. In all the summers he has tried everything. We tried to get a smattering of things. At the end of his meal, he would have Sprite, so we have a little Sprite. It is not a healthy meal out there. We pointed this out to him, and he said, oh no, the smoking and drinking is going to kill me first. That was his take. Don't worry, it's not the dessert. So that's fair enough. And so he really enjoyed himself, and I hope you will too. This last piece is a piece that he enjoyed. He talked a lot. In fact, right before he passed, he talked about one of his favorite actors was Peter Sellers, and he loved the Pink Panther. So they're going to play a piece from the Pink Panther. Join us for some snacks, and thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Good job.